Welcome back, artists. It's Mr. Fossa here to show you how to make a line design like the ones that you saw on my slideshow. If you haven't watched the slideshow yet about making patterns with lines, then you should pause the video, watch the slideshow first, and then come back. You'll see some designs like this. Another on the slideshow you see here. I have another one here on my desk just to show you where we're headed. Once you've watched the slideshow, the first thing you need is to gather together a couple of supplies. You just need some paper and something to draw with. Pencils are fine at first. As you go along, you might want a marker, like maybe an ultra fine Sharpie. This is not, it's a fine tip Sharpie, but maybe some finer tipped ones. I don't expect everyone to have pens like this around, but if you have pens with different thicknesses to them, this can really help. That way you can get different thicknesses of lines in your design. That's gonna make a big difference. With your paper, I would start small. These designs take a long time, and you don't want to discourage yourself by picking a humongous piece of paper at first. They do take a long time because they're pretty intricate. So some paper around this size. This is just 6x6. Any size will do. It can be a good idea to make a little frame around the edge at first, because then as a finished piece of artwork, it looks like it's framed kind of. You don't have to do that, but if you're going to, one way to do it is just to put a couple or 4 dots, near the corners, and then just connect the dots in some kind of a line. And I always say it doesn't really matter, but as we know, every single artistic choice you make matters. So the way you do that, is going to give your design some kind of look to it. And there's no right way or wrong way, but you want to think about it when you do it. For example, you probably don't want a line like this, crazy, but just kind of a simple curve. That way, it just has a little bit of style to it, and that just kind of sets up the paper a little bit. So put some dots in the corners and connect the dots. If you want, and if you just want to fill the whole paper, that's cool too. Then the next step is to kind of think about the paper being broken into some different shapes and filling, because the goal is going to be to fill each one of the shapes with a pattern. You can kind of see that here where, as I wrote in the slideshow, one of the shapes was the heart. But then you can kind of see where those thicker lines are. You can kind of see the different shapes that the piece is broken into. Again, there's no one right way or wrong way, but you want to be artistic about it. So, I might imagine a curvy line coming down like this. And I'm drawing them kind of light because I might want to change where they are later. I'm just kind of trying to imagine right now my paper, broken into maybe 4 or 5 pieces. I know from watching students work that kind of an automatic, kids just want to go like this, just kind of divide the paper up. That's not really the most interesting artistic way to do it. So find some way that has some style to it. And then the goal is to fill each of those shapes with an interesting pattern. There are lots of places to look for pattern examples. I showed some on the slideshow. You can find tons of these on the internet, whether they're a brand name or not, it doesn't really matter. And I think what you want to do at first is just have some fun. And we've talked about this in class before, that when we're learning something new or trying something new, imitating is always a good first step. So maybe not even using my finished paper, but just some other random piece of paper. I might just see ooh, this is kind of interesting. I want to see if I can copy that. If I want to see if I can figure out how that person did that. I'm just sort of experimenting to see. And I think, well, that was pretty fun. I might just doodle a little and try that for a few minutes and think, well, that was pretty interesting. And what about that one? I want to see if I could figure that out. It looks like maybe they just drew some parallel lines. Then they drew some lines kind of going perpendicular to those. And I can kind of see, oh yeah, if I keep repeating that, I can make a design that looks sort of woven like that basket. And I might try that for a few minutes and think, well, that was really fun too. And what you'll see is that after a couple minutes, imitating is not that interesting anymore. We want to move and push ourselves more toward innovating and creating designs that are interesting to us. So as you're going, it could be that the designs are just kind of random things, but they could be things that interest you, they represent you, musical notes, your dance shoelaces, or different things from nature that you like, whatever that happens to be. Once you come up with something you like, then what we want to do is start to kind of work those into the design. So I think it's probably common to think, oh, I'm going to really darken this, but maybe you don't want to, because what might happen is honestly that that line might be there just to sort of like guide you right now, but the line might end up just kind of going away, in the end. Maybe what I'll do is make a design here with some leafy shapes. Maybe I might make some little bubbly or speckly shapes, and you can see how, even though I started with that that line, the line is kind of going away now, and it's just sort of like a boundary to help me see, okay, now I need like a different kind of design here. I'm rushing a little bit, so you'll have more time to work on yours, obviously, but when you're doing yours, I think the more precise you can be so that it really does look like, everything is exactly where you meant it to be, I think is kind of the key thing. What I mean by that is if we're working with patterns, you don't just want to start like, I love the Dodgers as much as anybody, but if you just start going like this, this is really not a pattern. This just looks like someone took your paper and like scribbled on it when you weren't looking. You want everything to really look like it's where you want it to be. So take your time, be patient with it. And you might find that you love every choice you're making, or you might find that, some experimenting has to happen, and you might go, okay, well, this doesn't look the way I thought. Maybe you get another piece of paper and try again. We kind of expect that. When you're working, a couple things you'll notice. It actually works out great if the lines themselves, become patterns. So like you see in this example, there was the line, but what the artist did was made the line into a couple of strings like this, and filled those. They became patterns too. So you might try something like that. You're also going to notice that based on like how much you color in, how close together the lines are, and how detailed they are, some of the patterns have quite a bit of white space, and others have quite a bit more black colored in. So like if you notice here, like this design, because the lines are little teeny threads, it has a lot of white space. Whereas, this one here, because the lines are closer together, it looks more black, like especially from a distance, like that looks like a darker shape than this one. What you're gonna find is that if those are really different, your design looks good, as a whole. Whereas like if they're all about the same amount of white or the same amount of black, doesn't really look as interesting. So when you look, for example, at all these different patterns, you'll notice right away, like some of them look quite a bit more black, right? They have a lot more black colored in. Others have a lot more white space. And some are kind of like 50-50. Like you want to balance that. And you'll see, like I think that's what makes this example so great is like some of the parts have a lot of black, right? And other parts have a lot of white, and it just balances it out, that helps to balance it out a little bit better. You're also going to notice that some of the designs are really geometric, which means they have a lot of, we've talked about this before with shapes, they have a lot of shapes and lines that you know from math. Like I see rectangles, I see sharp corners and straight lines. Those have a really different look, right? Than, for example, the more natural ones, what we would call organic shapes. And so you'll see too in your finished design, like you see right here, that if some of the shapes are more organic or more natural shapes and other ones are more mathematical, that kind of balance is really good. That kind of balance is really good too. I think that's it. I think the fun part now is just to sort of see like how much fun you can have creating patterns that are interesting. I made some examples just to show you, when you start out, it might be that if the paper, say one of your shapes is a letter or a couple shapes, like one of your initials and a shape that has meaning, and then maybe what you might do is find an artistic way to, divide up the rest of the paper. Maybe I put this here kind of as a joke, but maybe you want to remember 2020, and maybe that becomes the center. I'm really missing hockey right now, and I really like the Kings, so I put a crown, and I might use that as the start. Or it could be, it could just be random. It's all just, random shapes and patterns. Both are going to work out. Both are going to work out great. Have some fun with it, and please, if you do finish a piece, I'd love to see a picture of it. So put it up on the Google Classroom, and that way I can take a look. Have a great day, everybody.